Hi, my name is Francois, and this is Super Teachers Unite, the show dedicated to finding out what it takes to teach like a superhero. Now, all of us had that favorite teacher when we were at school, and they were very influential early in our lives, and we remember them fondly. Now, in every episode, I'll interview business leaders and other super teachers so that they can share the stories about the super teachers in their lives that were so influential on the successes that they made of their lives. Now, they'll share stories from the classroom, but as well as the boardroom. In every episode, our guest stories will assist us in finding out, especially if you're a super teacher, what it is going to take to improve your practice. And if you're a business leader, how will you improve your people, your processes, and your profits? Now, if you need me to assist you in finding out how you can teach like a superhero, check out our website at staysuper.co.za. If we are totally honest with ourselves, we would admit that we compromise quite a lot. But once you start compromising on your values, it can lead to disaster. In today's episode, we speak to Captain Allan Edmunds, who is an international Boeing 777 pilot, but he's also a former air traffic controller. Now, why are we speaking to an airplane pilot when we're speaking about education in schools? I've met Allan before and we've had a chat, and the parallels between, piloting an airplane and ensuring a safe journey and getting everybody to the destinations safely and comfortably has a lot of parallels in the way in which we operate schools and the way in which we deal with everybody in the schooling environment. So in today's episode, we speak about a lot of things, and I mean what Allan shared with me today really resonates with how I think schools can really improve. So what we speak about is, number one, compromising on values and why values are so important and why we shouldn't compromise on values. We speak about leadership and how leaders need to start listening to, I don't want to say subordinates, but to their followers. How novice teachers who just come into the system should speak up, and that the leadership in the school should also listen to them, and then the reciprocity between those relationships. I really learned a lot from this interview and really hope that you would find a lot of value from it. But please tell us on social media what you think of these interviews. We really like to know how we can improve, but also what the value is that you get from this. Right, Allan, now that everybody has a little bit more information on who you are from the introduction, I know the teachers are going to want to stalk you on your different platforms just to find out who you are and what it is that you do. So where would be the best place for teachers to go and stalk you?
Well, I have a website that's still new under development, but it's aviatorl.com, and you can get me at al@aviator.com. aviatorl.com, I beg your pardon.
Excellent. What we'll do is we'll include that in the show notes and the comments, and whenever we post it on social media, we'll include those links and tag you so that people can go and find you. And I also know that on LinkedIn, because that's where a lot of the information I got about you, that's where you post quite a lot is on LinkedIn. What is your profile on LinkedIn?
It's Allan Edmunds at gmail.com. So it's pretty straightforward. Haven't changed the profile yet.
Okay, excellent. Cool. So we've got your email address and just Allan Edmunds in LinkedIn as well. We'll tag it there so that people can go and see. Now, I'm extremely excited today to chat to a Boeing pilot in bringing the flight deck into the classroom. So, Allan, I'm extremely obsessed about finding the traits that make good teachers great. And that's why we ask this first question to all of our guests. Tell us about a teacher that made a massive impact in your life.
Well, actually, I had three. Believe it or not, I actually had to think quite long. Well, it's been a long time. Let me just start off with that, since I was at school, but I managed to remember their names, which is quite impressive. But there were two people that really stood out for me. One was a Mr. Tinus Buerta and a Mr. Fambuljon. Unfortunately, Mr. Fambuljon lost his life about 2 years ago in a motorcycle accident after retirement. It was really sad. He had a great impact on my life in terms of just taking the time, and he was interested in my sports development. I was an athlete at school, and believe it or not, I used to do reasonably well at high jump, and I'm not a very tall person. And he took a great interest in watching me develop and go ahead. So that was one of the things that really, really stood out for me, is the fact that he took a little bit of extra time. And I think the great thing is about when you do sport, you do spend a lot more time with the teachers outside of the classroom. And Mr. Van Bjorn, also one of my sports coaches, Mr. Buerta is also one of my sports coaches, but he took about 3 or 4 of us under his wing, and once I nurtured us, but just gave us the time from an adult at school that, you know, if we had issues, we can come and speak to him, and he was very open to that. As the fundamental thing I think that I've learned from these people is just to spend time, a little bit of extra time, a little bit of extra effort. And it didn't take a lot of time from them. However, having said that, I really appreciate teachers that give up their Saturdays, their weekends to go and either do athletics or rugby and that kind of stuff with the kids. I really, really appreciate it. It's only years later and I realized how important that was and what a sacrifice it was on their part, from their time with their families to come and be with us kids. I really, really appreciate that for all of you that are participating in children's sports education and just the extra time spent. Big time kudos. Thank you.
It's interesting, Allan, because you know Helene Smits, it's a mutual friend of ours. She was on the podcast, and she also mentioned an anecdote about her own teacher who also took interest in her from a high jumping perspective. So I'm learning a lot about my colleagues in this instance, that they've done extramural activities, and that it looks like high jump is one of the favorite athletics, the field events under the people that I know.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, just getting over the hurdles, if you like, of life. It's kind of taught me that you can do more than you think you can. There was one other teacher, but not related to school. He was my first flying instructor. He was a bit of a nuts guy. His name was Rian van Niekerk. But what he did was he really pushed me to excel when I thought I couldn't really do it. He taught me to fly. He got me to my solo and then my private pilot's license. And then after that, I moved away. I used to live in Kempton Park. I grew up there. And I learned to fly in Wonderboom in Pretoria, where I also worked as an air traffic controller. And Rian was instrumental in getting me into aviation and getting me into the flying side of things. And he was a great instructor. He did some unorthodox teaching methods, but he was really good in extracting what the student didn't know they had. And I really appreciated him for that. Sadly, he lost his life a couple of years later in a training accident. He used to fly for Eskom and as a private commercial pilot for them, and used to instruct on the side. But he was very, very passionate about teaching and seeing people develop. And that's what I took away from it. And I carry that passion with me.
So the two things that I'm hearing from you here is, number one, is that the teachers at school took extra time. They took an interest in your life. And it sounds like a lot of it happened during extramural activities, like outside of the classroom. Correct. In that time that they can spend more time with the learners without having necessarily the pressures of the classroom and the curriculum, but the more relaxed, informal extramural activities gave them the opportunity to get to know you a bit better. Absolutely. And the time is difficult, especially in life the way it is today. It's very, very busy. I understand teachers always having to prepare for the next day and their own family, their own lives. And it's, I really, really appreciate, now that I'm a bit older and understand what sacrifice they gave up, I appreciate it so much more. But yeah, it's that time, the extramural times. In classroom, the teacher's attention is so diverted we used to have 28 kids in our class, and we weren't the best behaved kids. It was really tough for the kids to control the classroom and teach us, and to take a special interest then was difficult. There was one gentleman that stood out in terms of teaching. He was a history teacher, Mr. Bidgood, in my standard 7 years. I don't know what you call it now, grade 9. Grade 9. And but he made history absolutely fascinating. It was like a story, and the way he taught it was, you didn't have to study. It wasn't about dates and places. It was about the story behind everything. And he made World War II come alive to me. And I really, really enjoyed his teaching style.
It was awesome. So those are the folks that really stood out to me if I think back now.
No, that's amazing. And then the second thing that I'm taking from you is that the teacher doesn't necessarily have to be in a school or in a classroom. Like, we're exposed to teachers on so many different levels. And in your case, in training to become a pilot, you had instructors who were teachers. They may just not teachers in a school setting, but I mean, there's still a teaching or a learning objective that these mentors can take you through.
Very much so. I mean, especially tongue-tied, especially in a pilot's life, we are trained continually. So we spend twice a year. We have simulator sessions. They range between 3 to 4 hours each, and you do 2 sessions every 6 months. So in total, it's 8 hours every 6 months. And of that, you're getting checked, you're getting taught, and you're getting rechecked again, and things like that. And it's to maintain a standard, which I'm sure as a passenger, you'd be quite happy to know. But so I've been exposed to a lot of different teaching techniques and ways, and people, different cultures, the way they teach as well. It's been very, very interesting to see that. But again, teaching on all different levels, in classroom, in simulators, in the aircraft itself, it's been a journey and a learning journey. And I think that's what I've learned more than anything else, is that you're always learning. The day that you think you've arrived is the day that you need to hand your license back in again and hang your wings up. That's especially for us. You can't be arrogant about what we do. And I think as well, if you have a learning attitude, it's about an attitude carrying forward. That's really been the biggest thing for me.
So Allan, with all of your experience and the people you've met, especially in a learning teaching environment, what would you say is that one very important aspect or one characteristic or trait that a teacher needs to have?
It's an interesting question, and I think it's multifaceted. For me to narrow it down to one particular thing would be difficult, because everybody receives differently. For me, I enjoy enthusiasm. It's nothing worse than a teacher, instructor coming into the classroom and goes, guys, we've got 8 hours of this today. Let's just get through it and, just tick the box. And then and that, to me, I like to see enthusiasm. I like to see an interest and a passion for what they do, because if they're passionate, it means the subject means something to them. And that intrigues me. So I want to know as well. And it can be anything. In school, I really, like I said, this Mr. Bidgood, he was incredible, because he made history come alive. And you speak to a lot of people say, oh, history, no, come on, it's like it's gone. But the future is built on the past. And if you understand what's happened in the past, you'll understand where we're going as a future. But he made that kind of stuff come alive. So for me, that's probably one of my personal things that I enjoy. As a person is enthusiastic and they're passionate about what they do.
Yeah, it's like that rule we have when we do public speaking. It's like the audience can never enjoy your talk more than you enjoy delivering it. And it's the same in teaching. If you don't have that passion, if you don't have that enthusiasm for the lessons you're teaching, how can you expect that the learners in the classroom are going to enjoy being in your class?
Look, I can understand some learners are a little challenging. Some of them, it's a game to disrupt the teacher, and I have to admit that I may have done that in the past. But it's all in jest and all in fun. But if you make it interesting for them and challenge them, kids like being challenged, believe it or not. And you set the challenge, they will rise to the occasion, and that quiet little pat on the back that they get. And also, again, I understand it's very difficult if you have a bunch of classes and each class is 28 to 32 kids. To single out individual children is really difficult and probably shouldn't be done. But a little word of encouragement to a child, it doesn't have to be often. It does the world of good for them. It certainly did for me. Yeah. And as I said, the sports side, because you're spending more time with the teacher, they get to know you. And sport brings out a different facet of your character, because sport generally, it's fun, but it's also a lot of hard work. And the hard work normally comes with a little bit of pain. I used to be a middle distance runner. So it was a lot of work, but the teachers see that, and then they can work with the character that they're seeing unfold in front of them.
Allan, one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about finding out what are these traits that make good teachers great is the fact that I want to find the best teachers to go and work at the schools of their choice. And that's why we started the recruitment company, goteach.co.za. Now, you've worked with a lot of people. You are in charge of a lot of teams. And people need to collaborate in those teams. But when you decide to work with somebody or employ somebody, what are you looking for?
Again, I want somebody that's going to work with me, not against me. We have a very structured environment that I fly in and I work in. I'm in an airline, so I'm a Boeing 777 captain, as mentioned earlier. And so we have the structure of the crew is like this. There's a captain, there's a first officer. So there's 2 pilots, and then there's a purser who is in charge of the cabin. So that you get the flight deck and you get the cabin behind. And then the purser has the cabin crew who they direct and work with. If there are any issues, if the purser can't sort it out, it comes to me, and then as a captain, and then I will sort it out and take it further if needs be. So there are teams within teams, the way I see it. So the captain is in charge of the flight and the overall safety of the flight. And the purser would be in charge of the cabin, which would include passengers, etc. And what we call customers nowadays. It's not passengers, because these are people that are paying my salary, and I'm really happy to have you on board. So the team structure, because the airline environment is very structured, so we work on standard operating procedures, the team formation forms very differently. Now, at present, we are doing, I do crew resource management as training as well, where we train pilots on using your resources, and your resources generally are your crew, the greater part. You have the company that can help you, the engineer that can help you, you can have your traffic controllers that can help you, and things like, and it's pooling your resources together, but also the human factor part of aviation, which is decision-making, situational awareness, leadership, communication. And you find that communication is one of the biggest issues. I work in a multicultural environment, and communication has different challenges. Something that you think is easily understood because we're both South African, can be misunderstood quite easily, and that is a bit of a challenge. So if you have a look at that, there's a thing we started teaching recently. It's by Tuckman, you may know him, and it's talking about teams, how they form. So it's a forming, norming, storming, and performing. So for us, teams come together, and we don't have to be mates. So you may be surprised to know that very often, in fact, most 99% of the time, I don't fly with the same person again. And I've been flying for 15 years at the company I'm with in the Middle East. And but yet when we meet somebody, to an outsider, they'd think we've been flying together for the longest time. It's because of standard operating procedures. So we don't have to be friends, don't have to be mates in order to make it safe. And you might say to me, yeah, but that's an aircraft, and how often do things go wrong? No, they don't go wrong very often, thankfully. But we also, it's the same concept going into a simulator training session where you are being assessed, and it is a pass or fail. There too, you meet the person that you're working with as you get into the briefing room. An hour later, you're sitting in the simulator and you're handling emergencies. So does it work? Yes, it does. But the thing is, the reason it works is we have very strict operating procedures. And not everybody works in a regulated environment like I do. But it's regulated for a particular reason, because over the course of time, we've had accidents where people did not work together, that did not follow operating procedures, and it confuses each other, especially a junior person being a first officer speaking up against a senior person being a captain and telling him, mate, you got it wrong. And to resolve that conflict never used to happen because there were relational issues in it. And then operating procedures came through, and this crew resource management, human factors training has had a huge impact on that. And one of the landmark cases that we study is an accident that occurred in the mid to early 70s, actually. It was in Tenerife between Pan Am, American Airlines, and KLM, the Dutch Airlines. And they had an accident in fog where 2 747s hit each other, and the region of 500 odd people lost their lives. And the reason was, it was so simple. Had somebody in the flight deck of KLM just spoken up and voiced their opinion, that accident would never have occurred. So we took this as a huge thing to look at. So it comes to the forming part. So when you're looking at forming teams, I see it when I teach classrooms. The guys come in the morning, nobody knows anybody. It's a big airline, and the guys are very stiff. They sit around, and in the beginning of a group, everyone's polite. Everyone, oh no, after you. When you go through a door, everyone's like very polite to answer the questions, but it's very short answers, and very minimal feedback. The decisions are mostly taken. Nobody's really appeared to be any kind of leader because it's not required at that point in time. And that's the beginning part of the whole thing. But that's taken away because as the group carries on, it morphs into more of a norming and storming. So what they mean by that is the group becomes and forms their own norms, and any conflict gets resolved. So that's where relationship begins to build within the group. Now, we generally don't need that. The forming part is happened by our operation procedures. So we will arrive together, meet each other an hour or so before the flight, before we actually take off and go somewhere around the world. And our procedures have taken care of the nitty-gritty and the first part of the forming of a group. First of all, there's a leader. The leader is the captain. So we already know that. There's a designated leader. And the leadership style changes. So when you look at the forming group, you need for a brand new group, as it forms, you need direct leadership. You need somebody to give some kind of direction. Otherwise, it's just going to flounder. You don't want a micromanager, but you need someone to give direction. It's really, really important. Otherwise, the group won't move ahead. That's already done for us because there is a captain. He's earned his rank because he's passed the courses. The first officer has earned his position, so you know he can trust your colleague. So there's already a trust basis, just purely based on the company's training standards. And then it goes into the norming and the storming part, and very seldom we get to that. But what you want to do is get to the performing, where we perform seamlessly, where the first officer can speak to a grumpy captain and not feel like he's putting his life on the line, not feel like he's going to get fired if he says something, because that's not what we want. We want them to speak up. And so much so that the company has mandated a intervention model where it empowers the first officer, a junior person, and it might be a very junior person, to speak up to a very senior, experienced captain and say, listen, mate, this does not look good to me. And to take notice of that and solve it before it becomes an issue and a safety-related issue. You don't want that. So we are very focused on safety. So the main goal of us when we get together is we want to do this job safely. And after that, we'll look at the efficiency. And then we'll look at comfort for everybody, the passenger comfort and so on. But mainly, if it's safe, we basically won the game already. And then, like I said, the efficiency afterwards. And this is just a very basic structure of what we form. And it was by a man called Tuckman.
Allan, I found myself just like listening to this wealth of knowledge, because I think there's so much to unpack here, and I don't think we'll have like all the time to work through this. But in recruiting, in deciding who you are going to work with, it's extremely interesting what you just mentioned. And I never knew that the flight crew basically meet each other for the first time prior to the flight. Like that blew my mind. I saw you posted about that on LinkedIn, and I thought, this can't be true. I mean, there are so many lives that are dependent on how well the crew work together. And you would think that collaboration comes from years and years of trust and experience of people working together. And from a teacher point of view, from working in schools, the majority of good schools or good colleagues know each other for a while and they trust each other, but that doesn't happen in half an hour. That happens over 6 months, maybe even 6 years before you really start trusting your colleagues.
Yeah, I must qualify that though. This is a very big airline that I work for, and I'm very privileged to work for. And I love my job and I love what I do. So I'm passionate about what I do. I have worked for an airline back home in South Africa, much smaller, and we did feel like a family, and it was easier to work together. But there again, you go into your storming part where relationships can be challenging, and you look at your roster and, I'm flying with Bob. Oh, it's going to be this type of day. You know what it's going to be like, and you prepare for it. Whereas us, we become really, really good at first impressions. You always gauge the experience in the room when you meet your colleague for the first time. where are you from, what kind of flying did you before, and it gives you some kind of perception of who you're flying with. But the basis of the whole thing is that that person is qualified, which means they're up to a standard that is safe and efficient, and you can trust that person. So should something go wrong, I can lean on them for knowledge and support, and likewise for me as well. They can lean on me to help them, and we can work together on the whole thing. And that's the basis of the crew resource management structure that we work according. And it's come from history and accidents where things did not go very well. There's one I was thinking now, communication is key. And that's what team building attempts to do, is to increase the communication amongst the people in the team. So the person that's normally quiet, sitting in the corner in a different environment, will speak up. And that's what you want. You mentioned earlier on about recruitment. That's one thing I really have to thank our human resources team for. They recruit on the basis of, if I have to be on a flight deck with this person, can I sit with them for 8 hours? It might sound really silly, but it's really true, and they get it right. The people that I work with, we get the job going, get going, do what has to be done, do it safely and to the best of our abilities, according to the company procedures. And also, you've got to think, procedures shouldn't stifle thinking. Procedures are there as a basis and a solid guideline as to how to operate your aircraft, your classroom, etc. as well. The relationship comes later. So the relationship helps communication to be a little bit easier. And as I said, is to get the person that doesn't speak up very often to speak up. That's really the basis of it. For us, assertiveness is not that. Assertiveness is, does the person speak up when they should? And if they do, that's being assertive. And you can leave. Some people are quiet. Some people are louder. Some people are the clowns of the classroom type of thing. And that's just the way they are. And you can accept them for where they are. We used to, in terms of conflict, I was just thinking, we work on the parent-adult child. It's from a book called I'm okay, you're okay. And it's called transaction analysis. You may have heard about it already. So parent-adult child. So if there's any kind of conflict, and conflicts do happen, we are human beings, but it's to take the emotion out of it and bring it back to adult time of conversation, which is purely just facts. Let's get to the facts, work from there. If it's an issue, we can talk about it afterwards, but let's do what we have to do first. Let's get our flight safe, and we can chat about it a little later on. The relationship is great. Certainly from our last company, it makes it easier. It certainly does. You can't discount that. But it doesn't make it necessarily safer. In fact, sometimes it makes it worse. I've seen cases where, because I'm flying with my friend, I don't want to embarrass him. I've seen he's forgotten something. I don't want to embarrass him, so I'll leave it. That could lead to something. There's a case, an accident in a place called Nunavut in Canada, right in the north, close to the North Pole, and by a company called First Air. And there was a communication issue where they got themselves on high-speed landing into this little place. They're expecting weather to be better than what it was, and a few technical issues which I won't go into right now. But the basis of this is the first officer, you could see they had a bit of a friendship relationship going, and he's trying to talk to the captain, but the captain's not hearing him. He's completely saturated because he's compressed himself in terms of his approach. They're coming in fast. They were high. They're too fast. He's trying to get the airplane to slow down. And as you know, concentration goes down to a narrow little cone. And, your fight or flight type of response starts to come in. You don't hear stuff, and you don't comprehend and process stuff. And that's one of the things we look at quite a lot. So you want to have some RAM memory, if you like, and spare to hear and to be able to adjust to what's going on. And this first officer was talking to him, saying, hey, Blair, we're high, and Blair, we're fast, Blair, do this. And the guy's not hearing. And the sadness is that they crashed next to the runway into a hill, and they killed everybody on board. Thankfully, the aircraft was pretty much empty. So 8 people lost their lives, but it was so unnecessary. So we look at that kind of stuff, and we study these things and say, well, okay, the best would be to become, and this might sound a bit strange, professional friends as soon as you can. So friends don't talk in cliches. Friends talk directly. But again, it's the professionalism that is really paramount. And that's what we teach, and that's what we encourage in our flight decks, to speak up.
So, Allan, there's a lot of things rushing into my mind at the moment. So the one thing is, flights like what you guys are on and in charge of, that's high stakes environment. I mean, it's a crash costs people their lives. Now, I'm a big proponent of education saves lives, but I mean, it's not on the same level. It's not like if one teacher slips up in what they do today, it's not going to lead to the immediate death of somebody in the classroom. But the mindset, if we start adopting a mindset like that, so you know what, if I make a cardinal mistake, it might influence a learner in the classroom and impact their life negatively. It might not lead to their physical death, but it could lead to a death of interest. It could lead to death of attention just because I'm not operating at a level that I should.
It can, I mean, you look at businesses around. Businesses fail because there's a lack of communication, and people below the boss, if you like, if I could use that as a simple example, is that they don't speak up because they might be afraid of the boss, and the company falls. People didn't lose their lives physically, but they lost their livelihood. Now, coming back to the classroom part of it, creating that openness where a child can say, hey, sir, I don't think that's correct. Can you just go through it again? To create that kind of openness, I think is amazing, because it teaches a child that it's okay to challenge authority, not in a bad way, but just speak up, because you may need to. That's a different skill. It's not a learned skill, and the sum is wrong, and the way I work it out, it's not that. It's a human skill to just challenge, and no matter who the person is, at the end of the day, you want the facts to win. You don't want to have something go wrong because somebody was just too afraid to say anything. And I think it's really tough for kids speaking to adults, because it's out of respect as well. And especially if it's a very good teacher, they don't want to embarrass the person, and they don't want to embarrass themselves in case they're wrong. That, if we can eliminate that, to me, I think would be an amazing thing. If you get it wrong, you get it wrong. That's fine.
And in the same instance, when you're a staff member, when you're a newly qualified teacher, just getting into the profession, speaking up, or just at least like making yourself heard to a head of department or the deputy principal or even the principal, which I like pull the analog between the pilot of the plane and the principal of the school type of thing. Like, if the principal doesn't create a culture or an environment where it is okay for everybody to speak up, then you start suppressing voices that could lead to the detriment of the school.
Yeah, very much so. And it's not about trying to show up somebody. That's not the attitude required. I was very pleased once. We were starting up to go to Los Angeles. It was a really long flight, and Boeing 777 is two very big engines on the wings, one on each wing, which is pretty awesome. And we were busy starting up, and we get a telephone call from the back. So on these very long flights, it is a 15-hour flight, 15 to 16-hour flight. We have two full crews, so two captains, two first officers. So they, called augmenting crews. So I was the operating captain. I'm actually flying, and we get a call from the cabin. And the cabin crew member says, "Oh, I think I see something weird sticking out of the top of the engine." Okay, no problem. Which is like, all right, and she was a junior crew member. She'd only been in the company 3-4 months. Now speaking up to not only one captain, two captains, and a first officer. So I asked my colleague, "Hey, would you mind to go back and have a look?" And he went back, and she was right. There was something weird. And what had happened was the aircraft had come out of maintenance. And again, we all make mistakes, and that's the human factor. They use a long screwdriver, really long, you got these cowls like a bonnet of a car. So they're called cowls in an engine. And you got the engine, which actually does the work. And then you've got these things that come around the outside of it. It's called cowls. And to align it, there's a hole in the top, and they put this long screwdriver in, okay, that's where it fits, and then they clip it in on the bottom and secure it. But this gent that did it forgot to take the screwdriver out. Now, we don't know what could have happened. It could have been okay, And then again, it could have come free somewhere over wherever Europe, and next thing, some guy's busy pedaling down the road in Amsterdam with a screwdriver coming through his ears. You never know what could have happened. But I was so pleased that she had actually had the strength to phone us directly and to say, listen, this is really, really weird, you know. So when we pulled the airplane back and everything was fine, and the conflict, the problem was sorted out. Nice, easy fix. But it could have been a lot worse. And that to me was a lesson. Yeah.
But I think with something like that, it's so visual. And I think for somebody that works on an airplane and knows what a typical airplane should look like, once you pick up an abnormality, it's important to speak up. Now, in a school, you might not see an abnormality as evident like that, unless it's maybe infrastructural or something to do with maintenance in the school itself. I'm just thinking of Hoërskool Driehoek from last year in Feb, or the year before that had that catastrophic accident where a lot of learners were killed. But I mean, if we don't speak up when we think something is abnormal, and the channels do not exist for us to do that, that's when tragedy strikes. So as you said, that was at least an easy fix, but you don't want to take the chances in not acting.
Yeah. And you know, it's, yes, absolutely. You don't want to take the chance. But I was, like I say, so pleased that this person confronted us, and well, not so much confronted, but just let us know in a tiniest way. You know, they had the strength of character to do that, and I really appreciate it. And for us, being in a multicultural environment, some cultures, it is really difficult to speak up against the authority figure, because in their culture, you don't say anything. It's about saving face. And that in itself can be a very, very dangerous thing. You know, cultures are quite interesting.
So I know from the keynotes that you deliver, you're going to war with compromise, and you think we should conquer compromise. Why do you believe compromising is such a major problem?
Compromise is an interesting concept because it's very subtle. It doesn't happen like that. Today, I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to compromise on safety. So it's about having values. And if I may, my keynote is part one of, I'm hoping to be 5 parts. So basically what I'm saying is you compromise, and initially it starts on values. If you don't stick to your values, which is the framework by which you make decisions, if you begin to compromise, then it impacts on the quality of what you do. And so, but compromise is very subtle. It's literally, I've got away with the mistake I made, or I made the slip, nobody noticed. I make the mistake again, gee, nobody noticed. And then it becomes a habit. A habit becomes a norm, and a norm becomes a culture. And when you're in that, and people start getting away with things and doing things, oh, we never do that. Somebody came up with that rule. That's a silly rule. We don't do it. And that's how subtle it is. And then it begins to compromise safety and other things and quality. And people, especially in business, you know, if you are delivering a product, you want to deliver the best product to your clients. But if the people working with your product haven't got the same kind of passion and drive as you have, for them, compromises began to set in. I'll give you an example, an everyday example. And certainly in aviation, when we compromise, we make mistakes and don't learn the lesson from it, and it becomes a habit, it's been very, very dangerous. So an everyday example is like driving a car, and there's an SMS. And you can actually see in the rearview mirror, you can see the person's eyes are starting to divert towards, and they can't leave this telephone alone.
Yeah.
So the lesson is, I'll just quickly answer this text, or I'll just quickly read it, put the phone down, or I'll just quickly text because I'm at a traffic light, and then the traffic light's gone green. Sorry, a robot in South Africa has gone green, and people have gone, and the guy's still trying to. But that's a getaway for free kind of car. But sometimes a person's driving down the road at 120 kilometers an hour, and they're texting. We've all seen it, and if we're honest, we've actually all done it. But the lesson is not learned, the lesson of risk. So to me, compromise, that's where I start with compromise. And one of the keys to fixing that is reevaluating your values and where your values will take it, because that will ultimately drive your decision-making processes and how you conduct your business. if you have a value of honesty and putting that forward to your clients, you wouldn't end up with the issue that VW had many years ago when they had the emissions scandal in 2015. And for us in aviation, safety is one of the values that we hold most dear. Safety, then efficiency. So, but if I start compromising on that value, not only am I going to put people at risk, but I'm going to put my business at risk. And there are many examples, sadly, where people have begun to put money or put profitability ahead of things like safety or ahead of just quality. I look at Boeing themselves recently had the Boeing 737 MAX issue, and they had compromised because there was amalgamation of the company in 1997 with another company called McDonnell Douglas. And the CEO from that company came across to Boeing as the new CEO. And he said, you know what, I'm going to change this from a great engineering company into a profitable business. And he did. He was brilliant. Boeing made a huge amount of money. But how they made it was also slightly different. The mode of operation had changed, and the culture within Boeing wasn't quality first. William E. Boeing, the founder of Boeing, for him, he was a stickler for quality, because when people buy my airplane, they're going to know it's safe and the redundancies are amazing. And me as a pilot, we always used to have the saying, man, if it's not Boeing, I'm not going. But it's a great statement to say that, man, we have a lot of faith in this product that we get from this company. And sadly, things started to erode because profitability became more important. And in order to make profits, you need to make cuts. Yeah. And you start cutting, and do we really need to have this? Do we really need to have that on the aircraft? And that's where the compromise begins to set in. And then what Boeing was saving and selling to their clients on saving on training and etc., a thing called an MCAS system, which is the cause of the whole accidents. I won't go into detail, there's a lot of it, so it's a 45-minute lecture on its own, but they compromised there, and it cost them in the region of $19 billion. So that's why I'm passionate about compromise, and it starts very, very small. That's the thing.
And there's almost a culture of compromising that gets laid very early, that even when you're at school, if there are school rules and a code of conduct, and you start slipping on that at school level, like sometimes it's okay for you to have your hair a little bit longer. I mean, that's a silly example, but or not doing your homework today doesn't have the repercussion that it should have. Like every time you let slip, every time you let go of something, you are compromising. And there's almost a little bit on a meta level. You're not just compromising on that ideal, you're instilling a culture of compromising in the kids. So what then happens is, as they move into their jobs, they think it's okay to compromise. And that leads to a lot of damage.
Maybe another word, a better word, is getting away with something. And I know I was a kid as well, a long time ago. But if I could get away with it, I would. And if I didn't get punished for not doing my homework, not that it'd have to be bad punishment, but I didn't learn the lesson. And the lesson is to always do your best, always try your best. And that's a value that you take with you throughout life. And yeah, absolutely, perfectly said, Francois.
So there's a lot of schools that have these value-driven principles. And when you drive into the school premises, they've got these elaborate boards of the different values of the school. But if that's only lip service, if that's only, for marketing purposes, I mean, you're doing your school a disservice. If you have values in your company, in your business, in the school setting, if you don't stick to those values, I mean, there's no use in having those values whatsoever.
Absolutely. But people are people are putting their children into these schools because of those values. So these are your selling points. And at the end of the day, they want that instilled in their child. That's one of the reasons they chose that school. And really, it forms the basis. It's a framework from which you begin to expand to build up. So just to very briefly coming back to my talk. So it starts with values, and then it heads on to things like leadership. When you begin to compromise leadership, there's different styles of leadership. We spoke about the forming, then it's more of a directive style, and then there's collaboration as the storming and normally begins to, coaching and collaboration eventually begins to happen. and eventually to a point where the team will run on its own. But anyway, so it's about compromise, coming back to communication, leadership, compromising, and I use accidents to illustrate the point. And sometimes not using accidents, just the pure fun and joy of flying. And there's a lot we can learn out of the science of flying as well.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be looking at things that went wrong. There's a lot that goes right as well, and things that we've learned over the years to fix. And that's what I like to talk about with compromise.
So the one thing I wanted to mention before we end off is aviation has got this rich history of documenting fail cases or documenting case studies that we can learn from, and education doesn't necessarily have it in that sense. I know there are case studies and books on case studies that have been written, but I tell teachers as much as they can, like, keep a journal. I tell the principals, keep a journal. Take note of the occurrences in your school and reflect on them, and then start publishing those things, because you've learned as a pilot from other pilots' mistakes, and we need to do the same as teachers.
Fantastic. You mentioned a very, very important word, and that's reflect. And I'm sure you are all doing it anyways, just to, you get at home, it was a really tough day for these reasons, and you can name them. And then, but tomorrow you may not face those seasons or reasons again. But the point is to reflect. And if I had the same situation, how will I deal with it? And we do that in the aviation. In fact, we do that after our flights. And look, if I had to do this whole flight again and the situation be exactly the same again, would I do anything differently? And that's what makes a person gain experience and eventually become an expert. So reflection is really one of the things to drive home, to analyze your day. You planned it this way. Did it go that way? Why didn't it go that way? Well, for these reasons. Okay, what can I do next time? And that's what, to me, separates from the good to the brilliant.
Yeah.
Because I've had a look at it. A little bit of self-assessment as well, I think, is vital.
Yeah. And then for those teachers that are looking to work at excellent schools, where the principals are going to look for excellent teachers, you need to have the proof that you can operate under pressure, but then that you've got the proof of how you reflect also, because that shows how you differentiate from just the mediocre teacher.
You spoke one more thing. You spoke about sharing knowledge. And one of the very early things in aviation about sharing knowledge came from, would you believe, balloon pilots. But they didn't volunteer it. So, aviation was growing, and this is around about the First World War time era, where aircraft were getting a little bit more sophisticated, although not much in those days, but they could fly higher. And if you know anything, the higher you go, the oxygen gets less, and your brain doesn't function all that great, and you fall asleep, really. It's called hypoxia.
Yeah.
So the pilots were taking off, and they were crashing. And, obviously the manufacturer of airplanes was saying, look at these guys, these pilots are useless, man. We need people with the right stuff. These guys can't fly airplanes. Get us some better pilots. And it wasn't that at all. And it wasn't until one balloon pilot stood up and said, well, guys, when you go higher, the air is thinner and you can't breathe. We use an oxygen mask. But it took a lot of people to actually die before the message got spread. Let's not be like that going forward. Let's share our knowledge. You spoke about reflecting and writing things down and pushing the information around to one another. That's vital. That's fantastic. That's how you take a standard and you raise it to a really high standard. And that attracts other students and attracts other people to your organization or school.
Excellent. Allan, I believe that the keynotes that you deliver and the messages that you have would be ideal for something like parents' evenings at schools and for staff training sessions. Sure. If somebody would like to book you to do a talk, I know you do online talks and in-person talks. If somebody would like to book you to do a talk at their school, where do they go?
al@aviatorl.com.
Excellent. Allan, thank you very much for spending time with us today. I'm really looking forward to see your career soar, and especially your public speaking career take flight like you've done in your career so far. And just once again, thank you for being with us.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for the opportunity, Francois. It's really great chatting to you. Awesome.
Thanks, Allan. Stay super. Well, that's it for today's show. I hope that you found value and that your classroom or your boardroom is now a better place to work at. please go check out the website staysuper.co.za to find out how my keynotes, workshops, or mastermind can assist you in teaching like a superhero. Until I see you in person or chat with you online, stay super.